Know about the I just want to pause. Do you know about I didn't know about it till recently, the Hampton Roads Peace Conference, which occurred in February of 1865 between Lincoln, Seward, Secretary of State Seward, and the Vice President of the Confederacy. Have you ever heard of this?
I haven't. I've only read, I think, Dabney's book on Virginia, so I'm not super knowledgeable on the Civil War. But go ahead and tell us about it.
It's just, I know you want to steer clear of the ostensible fake, the ostensible motive for the Civil War. So I won't even name that S word, but it's wise to do so. But the Hampton Roads Peace Conference is important, February 1865, because it brings into question most of the mythology promoted by the normies on the animating forces of the Civil War. It states that Lincoln in the North, according to this mythology of Lincoln in the North, fought for the purpose of abolishing stuff, and the South fought for the purpose of protecting that same stuff. Actually, the Hampton Roads Peace Conference absolutely, definitively proves this is wrong, because you have a moment in time when the heads of state meet and literally they're saying things like, either side's like, look, the Confederacy exists because we need to protect the sovereign right of secession. The American South was the fourth biggest economy in the world when you roll those states together. The North was impoverished. The South paid 70% of the tariffs, and the northern mercantilist interest was enriched by the way that the tariffs shook out in America. The South was generally free trade, I'd say, in a healthy way. And the South just said, look, Virginia, the most important state of the South, most important American state, entered into the Union in 1788 by naming for itself a right of secession. And they said, this is what's most important to us. That's what the Civil War is over. And Lincoln says several times over and over again, really a reiteration of what the Emancipation Proclamation was, which was an emancipation of 0 souls from that heinous institution, beginning with an S, because it did not free those who suffered under that institution in the North. It only claimed to free those in the South, and really, as countless others have noted before, all he was trying to do is foment revolution in the South by saying to Southern people under that yoke, go ahead and rebel against your owners. It'll only help us out in the North. But all of those people who suffered under that yoke in the North remain utterly free. It's just an odd twist if you read about this particular wartime meeting between heads of state under sovereign international immunity principles, because you have Lincoln saying, well, so what do you guys want? You want to come back into the Union and protect that institution that everyone says we're fighting over? And they're like, no, we don't want to come back in at all. That there are several. One, we don't like the tariff system, and number two, we're supposed to be able to secede, and our most important state is Virginia, and you're denying this. And Lincoln, as he'd repeated several times from 1855 to 1865, said, all I want to do is protect against the spread of that institution into the territories. But you Southern states, as he'd said several times in those 10 years, you can keep this institution. It's proven by what he says there at the Hampton Roads Peace Conference. It's really, I'm saying this not in a cynical way. I'm saying it in a way where I'd endorse the term. It is the proof text for why it's not just like lost causers who say this thing about the American South, that it really is about states' rights and localism, and what an old Catholic like me would say, subsidiarity. It has nothing to do with that S term. And de Tocqueville, who, by the way, offered to broker a deal between Lincoln and Jeff Davis. And Lincoln was the one that said, no, not interested. He said that the condition in which American staves, those who rhyme with staves, they have the worst living conditions in the whole of the United States, in New Jersey, northern ones. So the ones in the South are not nearly so bad off as the ones in the North. This is captured a bit in Gangs of New York, where literally the federal forces turned the musket on Northern blacks and those who were dodging the draft, because Lincoln was so unpopular in the North as well. They had riots and blacks in the North that were literally getting slaughtered because of all these complicating factors. So I'm jumbling a lot together here, but I think it's important that people know that is a mythology that you've been handed on. There's one cause for the War of Northern Aggression, as it's often called, and it is secession / tariffs. It has nothing to do with what you've been told.
Now, you mentioned in your list of popes there during this time frame, as you got up into, you mentioned the Bays ones, and you said Pius, all the way up to 11. And I'm curious that you skipped Benedict the 15th. Is that because I read J.N.D. Kelly's History of the Popes? I know he's Oxford Anglican historian, but he made an interesting note that that Benedict the 15th seemed to be soft on modernism and was in some way either outright a supporter or cajoled into supporting the League of Nations, which was the Fabian institution at that time. As a result, that was attempted by the Rhodes Milner Roundtable groups to set up the proto-world government at that time, which was a socialist world government at that time. Is that what? Did you know about that? It's not a trick question. I'm just curious. Like, was that like what, or do you think Benedict the 15th was just kind of an not that important figure, or why is he not in the Bayes list?
Like all those things at once. I think I'd heard that a long time ago, but I honestly forgot that he falls in that chronological time period. But that all checks out with me, and he's often forgotten about just because I include him in my list of good 20th century popes who spoke out against feminism. But people often just forget him, to be honest. But I had heard that he's weak on several things it was important to be strong on. And multinationalism was way up there. I mean, I'll just get it out now. So Pius IX had this close kinship with Jefferson Davis. It was really, really, he was the one that coined the term prisoner of the Vatican. He literally never even set foot into Rome, not even to go to the Trevi Fountain or whatever, or the Colosseum. So he was really big on what would later come to be called subsidiarity. And he knew that the institution over which people think that the Civil War in America was fought, he knows that that's wrong, but he saw way past. He didn't miss any tricks. He understood that Jefferson Davis and the American Confederates were really the rightful defenders of what would come to be called subsidiarity, even though it wasn't called that until Pius XI. Pius X, of course, is the one that condemned all of modernism, and he condemned liberal nationalism as one of those modernisms. And again, you intoned it really well, Jay.
And this by the way, for the audience, if you're interested, the book that covers this from the Catholic perspective is really just a collection of papal documents. It's the 16 papal documents from Tan Press that covers this period in terms of the papal attitude that were the texts that were being written by these very popes.
Yep.
Well, go ahead.
Yeah. Then Leo the 13th, actually, a lot of people don't know this. I know this well. For Thomas Aquinas, this is very important. The property right as a natural right. Technically, you can only say life and liberty are natural rights for Aquinas. He says individual private property rights are a corollary, a necessary corollary, entailed. They're one of the logical entailments of life and liberty. It requires private property to be carried on. So in every case, you need it. So it's basically a natural right. It is the Leo the 13th, the Thomistic Leonine Pope, that says this is such a strong connection in Thomas that I'm just going to bump it into the list of life, liberty, and property. So he's actually the one that does that in two of his encyclicals. He says, even though I'm the Thomistic Pope, I'm going to go ahead and bump up property in. And this is why property is really important, even to the Vatican. This is why we have land holdings, though the Masons don't think we should. So that's Leo the 13th, probably my favorite of all the popes. And then, of course, Pius the 11th is the one who actually, adverting back 40 years to one of those papal encyclicals by Leo the 13th, literally called 40th year, 40 years ago, Quadragesimo Animo, he uses the term subsidiarity for the first time ever. And now it's like a term that you can go find in Webster's dictionary. He made it up, subsidiarita in Latin and Italian. So it actually means local government is natural and good, and that it's a grave evil to govern from afar.
Would that explain, in your view, and it's not a trick question, I'm not trying to trap you, I read all the encyclicals of Leo XIII, the Light of the Heavens book that Tan puts out. There may be more that are not in that book, but I read that book, which is 500 pages or whatever. But doesn't he has an encyclical, if I recall, it's been probably 15 years since I read it, but doesn't he have one on Christian democracy? Would that be fit into what you're talking about with this idea of localization from his perspective?
From Leo's?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he has I think he has an encyclical on Christian democracy.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what I have to tell a lot of the trad cats is that, like, Aquinas actually advocated most practically in a way that Leo would be really proud of as a Catholic, and advert to time and time again. He says, look, because there are these three good regimes, and monarchy is actually the best but the hardest to do right. Aristocracy is the second best, second hardest to do right. Polity, republic, is the third best of the three good ones, but it's the easiest to do right. I advocate for, Thomas Aquinas, I advocate for a mixed regime with a mixture of the three kinds of powers. And I think he locates in them one of the Psalms that says, look, there are these three basic powers in governance. There are basically the monarchical power, there is the aristocratic judging power, and there is the power of the many, the legislative. The lawmaking body is the people. Does this sound familiar? Yes. Leo the 13th actually, on this Thomistic basis, says, well, Thomas says the mixed regime is a fourth type that mixes monarchies, aristocracies, and republics. And that's what Thomas says will work most of the time, and you'll get the good parts of monarchy, aristocracy, republic. And Leo says that's what is special about the American system of three-branch rule. Leo gives a little nod to Montesquieu here, three-branch government. And I think one of them, Thomas or Leo, I haven't looked at it in years, but Thomas or Leo actually quote that psalm, saying there are those three basic types of government. There's the executive power, right? Wielding the police power. Yeah. There's it's lawmaking, law enforcement, and law interpretation. That's basic. That's a natural law principle. Those are the three branches of government, and it's Thomistic mixed regime. It's deep stuff, and it's the best way to preserve what Pius XI will call subsidiarity, which you get with monarchy, which you get with aristocracy. It's not only for republics. Subsidiarity is for all good governance.